Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Rain was pouring down on the streets of Chicago, turning the sidewalks into silver mirrors under the streetlights. Emma Harper, a lively, independent young woman, was walking home after a long day at work. She clutched her coat, her face partially hidden by its hood, and was about to climb the stairs of her apartment building when her gaze caught on a figure that stopped her in her tracks. A man sat soaked to the skin against the wall of a nearby building, shivering in the rain. His torn clothes clung to his skin, and his gaze, though clear-eyed, seemed to bear the weight of years of hardship. Despite his obvious misery, there was something in his posture, an undiminished dignity, an invisible strength that contrasted with his fragile appearance. Emma hesitated for a few seconds, aware of her natural caution. Yet a surge of compassion stronger than her fear pushed her to approach. "Do you want to come and warm up at my place?" she asked, her voice slightly trembling, a mixture of worry and courage. The man looked up at her in surprise. A shy but genuine smile played on his lips. I, thank you. Yes, I would gladly accept," he replied, clasping his trembling hands together. Emma guided him to her apartment building, unaware that this simple gesture would change not only his evening, but his entire life. In that moment, in the pouring rain, two worlds that seemed separated by nothing would collide. And neither of them could yet guess how much this coincidence would transform them both. The wind whistled through the alleys of Chicago, carrying with it the rain that pounded the pavement. Emma Harper, panting from her run in the rain, pushed open the door to her apartment building and immediately smelled the warm scent of wood and freshly ground coffee. She pulled back her hood and shook out her hair, letting the drops fall onto the entryway carpet. Her unexpected guest, Marcus Williams, stood on the landing, soaked and silent, his dark eyes taking in every detail of her apartment with an almost childlike curiosity. Emma couldn't take her eyes off him, he seemed so different from the homeless people she'd encountered before. There was a quiet nobility in his features, and in his gaze, a mixture of fatigue and lucidity that fascinated her. I can offer you a towel and some hot tea," she said, composing herself, aware of her slightly shaky voice. Marcus nodded, gratitude evident in his eyes. He followed Emma into the living room, clumsily avoiding stepping on the still damp carpet. His soaked clothes clung to his skin, revealing the silhouette of a man who, despite everything, seemed strong and resilient. Emma handed him a napkin. "Thank you," Marcus murmured, taking it. You're very kind." "It's nothing," Emma replied, smiling weakly, though a strange mixture of embarrassment and intrigue gripped her heart. "You must be exhausted. I suppose you want to dry off a little." Marcus nodded and headed toward the bathroom Emma showed him, his gait hesitant but full of dignity. She sensed a strange tension in the air, a mixture of curiosity, empathy, and subtle discomfort. The simple act of welcoming him into her home had already shaken her certainties about life, about encounters, and about the unexpected. Emma stood in the living room, staring into the raindrops that trickled down the window panes, pondering the singularity of this man. Something about him told her he wasn't just a passerby on the street. He carried a mystery, a hidden past, and she felt that tonight would be the beginning of a story she would never have imagined. Emma guided Marcus into her apartment, a cozy little haven in the heart of Chicago. The light walls and polished wood furniture exuded an atmosphere of comfort and simplicity. Bookshelves full of books, green plants in strategic corners, and soft light from dim lamps created an almost surreal cocoon for someone who had just spent his life on the streets. Marcus observed every detail carefully, his dark, penetrating eyes scanning the room as if trying to read the stories each object could tell. "You have a beautiful place," he murmured, his voice slightly hoarse from the cold and emotion. "It feels like a sanctuary." Emma smiled, a little embarrassed by the compliment. "Thank you. I've lived here for a few years. It's simple, but I like it here." "I'm guessing you've experienced less comfortable situations," she said softly, not wanting to dig too deeply. Marcus nodded, a faint, sad smile on his lips. "You could say that. Life has taught me a lot, but not always in the easiest way. Emma then noticed his posture. Despite his damp clothes and apparent situation, he maintained an almost instinctive dignity. He wasn't begging or complaining, but watching with suppressed curiosity. This aroused in her a mixture of admiration and perplexity. "Would you like something to drink?" she suggested, opening the cupboard to make some tea. "Tea, that would do me good, thank you," replied Marcus, settling down on the sofa. Emma returned a few minutes later with 2 steaming cups. She sat down opposite him, noting the way he handled the cup with surprising, almost ceremonious delicacy. "So, what brings you here tonight?" she asked, trying to mask her curiosity. Marcus took a deep breath, as if choosing his words carefully. I'm looking for some rest. Not just from the rain or the cold, but a real moment where I can just be. Without judgment, without pressure. And I think I've found it here, at your place." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. There was a raw sincerity in his words, something she hadn't heard in a long time. She understood that this man wasn't just a passerby on the street, but someone with a story, invisible scars, and perhaps a secret he wasn't yet ready to reveal. "Well, you're welcome here," she murmured. "You can stay as long as you need." Marcus looked up at her, and for the first time, a flash of deep gratitude crossed his eyes. Emma sensed then that this chance encounter was going to be more important than she had imagined. Night hadn't yet completely fallen, but already, a fragile but powerful bond was beginning to form between them. The bathroom exuded a warm, comforting steam. Emma remained in the living room, occasionally glancing toward the half-open door, aware that Marcus was taking a shower after his long day in the rain. She absent-mindedly tidied up, but her mind kept returning to the man sitting in her apartment a few minutes earlier. There was something about his presence that made her both nervous and curious. A few moments later, a soft noise signaled that Marcus was finished. Emma looked away, trying to focus on a book on the coffee table, but the tension in the air was palpable. When he finally emerged from the bathroom, he was wrapped in a towel, his hair still wet, and his clothes were strewn haphazardly on the counter. Emma felt her heart beat a little faster. The vulnerability of this man, who until then had seemed so strong and mysterious, created an unexpected unease. She stood up slightly, instinctively offering space, while trying not to stare at the towel that still held the shape of her body. "I'm going to get dressed," Marcus said, his voice slightly hoarse, aware of the embarrassment he might feel too. Emma nodded, a mixture of curiosity and nervousness in her eyes. She headed back to the kitchen, making more tea to soothe her own discomfort, but she couldn't help but hear the rustling of clothes and the sound of her hesitant movements. When Marcus finally emerged from the bathroom fully dressed, there was still that aura of mystery about him. His damp clothes had left traces of his presence, and the sheer clumsiness of his movements accentuated the contrast between his dignity and his apparent situation. Emma felt a mixture of fascination and embarrassment. "Thank you for everything," said Marcus, taking the cup of tea Emma offered him. "Your home, it's a real haven." Emma smiled shyly. There was a disarming sincerity in his voice that touched her deeply. She realized that this simple act of compassion, offering her shelter for the night, had just created a subtle but powerful bond. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt that this night, and this encounter, would mark a turning point in her life. There was a mystery to be uncovered, stories to be heard, and a connection that went beyond the obvious. The tension wasn't just physical or awkward, it was emotional, fragile, and promising, like an invisible thread beginning to connect them. The rain had finally subsided, leaving behind the damp, invigorating scent of the city. Emma and Marcus sat down in the living room, each with a steaming cup of tea in their hands. The warm light from the dim lamps made the atmosphere soft, almost intimate. "You seem to know a lot about life," Emma said after a moment of silence, finally breaking the tension. Marcus shrugged slightly, a wistful smile on his lips. "You learn quickly when you have no choice," he replied softly. "Life has forced me to understand certain truths that others only learn with time." Emma listened to him attentively, fascinated by his way of speaking. He didn't speak arrogantly or plaintively, but with a lucidity and wisdom that seemed beyond his years. "And you are, who?" she asked hesitantly, aware that her question might seem intrusive. Marcus placed his mug on the coffee table and looked her straight in the eyes. "I'm just someone who's made mistakes, someone who's had to start over several times. But that's not important now. What matters is this moment. The fact that you reached out to me." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something about the way he spoke that touched her deeply, as if she had just met someone who could see beyond appearances. "You know," she said finally, "I've lived alone for a long time, and sometimes you feel isolated, even when you're surrounded by people. But tonight you reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten, that helping someone can change much more than just their own life." Marcus smiled, but there was a flicker of nostalgia and sadness in his eyes. "And I almost forgot that there were still people who do that without expecting anything in return," he said. Most people look the other way. Their conversation continued slowly, gradually revealing snippets of their lives. Emma spoke of her childhood, her ambitions, and her fears. Marcus recalled his experiences on the streets, his struggle to survive, and the loneliness he had learned to endure. Each word strengthened the fragile but real bond between them. Emma realized then that Marcus wasn't just a man in distress, he was a whole person, with a depth and complexity that fascinated her. And Marcus, for his part, seemed to sense in her a rare sincerity, a refuge where he could finally be himself. This evening was not just a moment of sharing, it was the beginning of a relationship where empathy, respect, and mutual curiosity combined to create something unexpected and powerful. Over the next few days, Marcus gradually settled into Emma's apartment, as if his presence was naturally expected. He had maintained exemplary discretion, he helped with household chores, took care of small repairs, and always respected Emma's space and habits. Yet, despite this familiarity, a mystery hovered around him. Emma had noticed a small leather notebook that Marcus always kept close by, lying on the coffee table or tucked into his pocket. Sometimes she would see him open it, his dark eyes scanning the pages with an almost obsessive intensity. Curious, she finally asked him. "Marcus, I can't help but notice, this notebook is important to you, isn't it?" Marcus looked up at her, a small, enigmatic smile on his lips. "Yes," he replied after a moment of silence. "It contains things I'm not yet ready to share. Memories, and sometimes thoughts I prefer to keep to myself." Emma felt a thrill of intrigue. There was something powerful about his demeanor, a mixture of vulnerability and control. Marcus wasn't just a man who had lived on the streets, he carried a history he carefully chose to protect. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes keeping secrets can be exhausting. Even if you have the right to choose who you tell them to, it always ends up weighing you down." Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the notebook. "I know. But some things, some hurts, some truths, take time to share. And besides, it's not just a matter of trust. It's a matter of timing." Emma felt curiosity mingled with admiration. Marcus wasn't just mysterious, he was deep, complex, and every word he spoke seemed charged with intense life experience. She understood that this man had been through trials few could imagine, and that he wasn't just the homeless man she'd met in the rain. "I understand," she murmured. I guess I'll have to be patient." "Yes," said Marcus, smiling slightly. "And I'm grateful that you are." This conversation left Emma pensive. She felt like Marcus was a book she could only touch on, but every page opened revealed a fascinating depth. The tension between curiosity and respect, between attraction and mystery, created a unique atmosphere in the apartment. It was no longer just a question of help or gratitude, there was something more, a connection that was woven in the silence, the glances, and the moments shared. The notebook, discreet but powerful, remained a symbol of what Marcus was still hiding, and Emma felt deep down that this mystery would transform their relationship far more than she could have imagined. The following days passed in a gentle and almost surprising routine for Emma. Marcus was attentive, helping to tidy the apartment, prepare meals, and even carry out small repairs that the young woman had long put off. Each gesture, however simple, revealed a skill and intelligence that few suspected behind the frail and clumsy appearance of the man she had met in the rain. One morning, while Emma was doing the dishes, Marcus walked up behind her, grabbing a cloth to wipe the table. "Are you doing all this alone?" he asked in surprise. "Well, most of the time, yes," she replied with a tired smile. "But I'm starting to wonder if I shouldn't accept a little help." "Then let me help you," he said with a discreet, almost amused wink. Emma felt a familiar warmth wash over her. It wasn't just gratitude, it was the sense that Marcus was bringing a lightness and balance to her life she hadn't felt in a long time. Their bond was growing, fueled by these simple but meaningful gestures. One afternoon, Marcus showed off his DIY skills. He managed to repair a rickety shelf with unexpected precision, and Emma couldn't help but marvel at his skill. "You're amazing, Marcus," she said. "How did you learn all this?" "Life has taught me," he replied, shrugging modestly. "You learn quickly when you have to fend for yourself." But what fascinated Emma most was the way Marcus understood things without needing to be explained. He seemed to see problems before they became obvious, and his advice, always relevant and measured, had a wisdom that went beyond visible experience. "You know," Emma murmured one day, sitting down next to him on the sofa, "there's something about you I don't quite understand. You're more than I thought at first glance." Marcus slowly turned his head towards her, a barely perceptible smile on his lips. "Perhaps," he said. "But some things must remain uncovered over time." This seemingly simple sentence left Emma thinking long after Marcus had resumed his duties. There was something about this man that went beyond mere appearances, something deep and complex that fascinated her and that she wanted to understand. As the days passed, their friendship strengthened. The shared silences, the thoughtful gestures, the sincere and sometimes introspective conversations created a unique bond. Emma felt that Marcus was becoming an indispensable presence in her life, someone she could trust, and whose captivating mystery drove her to discover more and more. And Marcus, for his part, seemed to find in Emma an unexpected refuge, a place where he could be himself, with his strengths and weaknesses, without having to protect himself from the outside world. Their relationship wasn't just a friendship, it was a mutual discovery, a fragile but authentic complicity that transformed them both. Night was falling slowly over Chicago, and the city lights twinkled through the apartment's large windows. Emma and Marcus had settled into the living room, each with a cup of tea. The air was quiet, almost charged with silent anticipation, as if time had slowed down to allow something important to emerge. "Emma," Marcus began, his voice hesitant but full of gravity, "I think it's time I told you a little about myself." Emma watched him intently, sensing that this moment would mark a turning point. "I'm listening," she said softly. Marcus took a deep breath and looked into her eyes. "I've had a complicated life," he said finally. "I've made choices I regret, and I've faced situations no one should ever have to face. I've lost people I loved, and I've been betrayed by others I trusted." Emma felt her heart clench. Marcus's words were simple, but their emotional weight was immense. He continued, with almost painful frankness. "At one point, I had to flee, not just the place, but the people as well. I found myself alone, forced to survive on the streets. And even though I found moments of strength and resilience, there is still a part of me that remains marked by those experiences." Emma didn't know what to say right away. She could feel Marcus's sincerity and depth weighing on her. He wasn't looking for pity, he was sharing a part of his life to create a bond based on trust. I can't imagine what you've been through," she whispered. "But I'm glad you're telling me. You trust me, and I respect that." Marcus gave a small smile, but there was still a hint of sadness in his eyes. "It's hard to open up, especially when you're used to hiding everything. But with you, there's something different. I feel like I can be myself, without a mask." Emma felt an intense emotion wash over her. She understood that Marcus was not just a man scarred by the streets, but a complex being with deep wounds and difficult choices. And yet, despite his past, he retained a rare dignity and wisdom. "I'm glad you're here," she said finally, her voice trembling but sincere. You're teaching me something about myself, too. A comfortable silence fell, filled with respect and mutual understanding. The night wore on, and with it, a fragile but powerful bond was forming between them. Marcus was no longer just a mystery, he was becoming a pivotal presence in Emma's life, and she felt that in discovering his past, she was also discovering a little more of the strength and depth of her own humanity. That evening, Emma realized that their meeting in the rain was no accident. It was the beginning of a relationship that would go beyond the obvious, built on trust, resilience, and mutual discovery. Night had long since fallen, but the Chicago sky seemed to want to remind them of its presence with a sudden outburst. The rain fell in torrents, hammering against the windows like furious drums, while the wind howled through the deserted alleys. Emma and Marcus sat in the living room, each with a steaming cup of tea, but the din outside made every movement, every breath, almost palpable. Emma watched the lightning streak across the sky, intermittently illuminating the silhouettes of the nearby buildings. Her mind, accustomed to solitude, was strangely restless. Marcus, for his part, kept his gaze fixed on the window, his serious features illuminated by the intermittent light. There was something captivating about his demeanor, a restrained intensity that made Emma's heart beat faster than she would have expected. "This rain," she said, breaking the silence, "it seems like it wants to keep us here, just the two of us." Marcus slowly turned his head towards her, his dark eyes reflecting the light of the lightning. "Maybe that's exactly what she's doing," he replied, his voice soft but firm. "Sometimes storms force people to confront how they really feel." Emma felt a mixture of embarrassment and excitement pass through her. There was a truth in his words that resonated deeply within her. She looked away, but felt Marcus follow her with his eyes, attentive to every micro-sign of her reaction. She whispered hesitantly, "I never imagined that this meeting, that a simple night could become this." Marcus placed his cup on the coffee table, took a step closer, but stopped respectfully, leaving enough space between them to not break the fragile tension. "Some encounters are unexpected," he said simply. "And some people change our lives without us even realizing it." Thunder rumbled, rattling the windows. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. Her hands, slightly trembling, clutched her cup as if to hold on to something tangible. Marcus, noticing her gesture, gave her an almost imperceptible smile, full of gentleness and care. "Emma," he murmured, "I've never met anyone like you. You see people, not just what they show, but what they really are." Emma looked up at him, their eyes meeting in a mixture of curiosity, respect, and implied desire. The storm outside seemed to mirror exactly what she felt inside, a tumult of emotions, a mixture of fear, fascination, and something she couldn't yet name. They remained like that, silent but connected, listening to the rain, the wind, the thunder, and the beating of their own hearts. Every gesture, every look, every silence forged a bond that went far beyond friendship. That night, the storm wasn't just outside, it resonated between them, in the emotions, the tensions, and the implicit promise of profound change. Emma understood that this meeting and this storm were a catalyst. Once the lightning had passed and calm returned, nothing would ever be the same between them. And Marcus, silent but present, seemed to feel exactly the same way. The next morning, the rain had given way to a gray but clear sky, with rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Emma's apartment was bathed in a soft, almost comforting light, a stark contrast to the intensity of the previous day. Yet, a sense of anticipation hung in the air, as if something important was finally about to be revealed. Marcus sat by the window, holding his notebook close to him. He looked thoughtful, almost vulnerable, a stark contrast to his usual calm assurance. Emma, sensing the moment was right, walked over and sat down opposite him. "Marcus," she said softly, "you feel ready to talk to me about it, don't you?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, Emma. It's time you knew who I really am." He opened his notebook carefully, as if revealing not only written pages but a part of his soul. "I'm not who you think I am," he began. "I lived on the streets, yes, but it wasn't my true choice. Before all that, I had a very different life. A career, responsibilities, ambitions. But I had to leave everything behind because of circumstances I could never control. Emma felt her heart race. She knew Marcus was no ordinary man, but hearing those words hinted at a reality she hadn't suspected. I was involved in important matters, projects that affected many people, he explained. But certain decisions, certain betrayals, forced me to disappear. I had to rebuild myself from scratch. Emma placed a hand on his, gently, to encourage him to continue. And that's why you kept this notebook, she asked. To record your life and your thoughts, so you wouldn't lose them? Exactly, he replied. Each page is a fragment of my life, a part of who I was and who I have become. And I wanted to be sure that, if I were ever to reveal my truth, it would be to someone I trust, to someone like you. Emma felt an intense emotion wash over her, admiration, surprise, but also a deep respect for Marcus's strength and resilience. He wasn't just a man scarred by the streets, he was someone who had endured unimaginable hardships and survived with dignity and intelligence. Marcus, she murmured, I'm impressed. Anne. I'm glad you trusted me to tell me. Marcus gave a small, grateful smile. I knew you would understand, he said. And I think this meeting gave us both a chance to rebuild ourselves, not just me. Emma felt then that this revelation changed everything. The mystery surrounding Marcus, the notebook, his thoughtful gestures, and even the moments of tension and complicity they had shared now took on a deeper meaning. She understood that their meeting in the rain was no accident, it was the beginning of a story where trust, empathy, and resilience would transform them both. For the first time, Emma saw Marcus not just as a survivor, but as a man capable of greatness, depth, and transformation. And she knew, with a newfound certainty, that their bond, born of storm and compassion, would become a pillar of their lives. The days following the revelation were filled with a sense of renewal. Marcus had finally revealed his past to Emma, and with this shared truth, a sense of freedom settled between them. The apartment, once a temporary refuge, became a true home, laden with memories and silent promises. One morning, the sun filtered through the large windows, illuminating the light walls and wooden furniture. Emma and Marcus sat side by side on the sofa, their hands occasionally brushing against each other's, without the need for words. The bond that had grown over the days and through confidences had grown to become something deep and sincere. You know, Emma murmured, a slight smile on her lips, I never believed that life could change so quickly, just because of one encounter. Me neither, Marcus replied with a smile. But sometimes it's the unexpected moments that become the most important. Their eyes met, and in that silent intensity, everything was said. They didn't need grandiloquent promises, their mutual presence was enough. Their lives, once marked by loneliness, loss, and caution, now opened to the possibility of a shared future. So, said Emma, do you think we're ready to face what's next together? Marcus nodded. Yes. With you, I feel complete. And I believe we can face whatever life throws at us. The rain had subsided, giving way to a soft, soothing light, as if the outside world was silently celebrating their decision. Emma felt a shiver of happiness run through her body. She understood that true refuge lay not only within the walls of her apartment, but in the trust, complicity, and budding love they shared. They stood up, hand in hand, and went to the window to watch the city awakened by the morning light. Chicago, with its damp streets and golden reflections, seemed to offer a new chapter, virgin and full of promise. No matter what happens, said Marcus, I know we will face it all together. Emma smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. Together, yes. And that day, in the heart of a bright morning, they understood that their meeting in the rain had not been a coincidence. It had been the catalyst for a transformation, the first page of a story that was only just beginning. Their past, with its trials and wounds, had given way to a present and a future full of trust, respect, and infinite possibilities. Hand in hand, Emma and Marcus looked to the future, ready to write each chapter of their new life together, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side, united by experience, understanding, and budding love.